We're on, baby. Not a moment too
This
soon.
This next segment is sponsored by Cars.com.
Don't you wish? We'll get there, baby. Don't worry. Don't worry, sweet baby. We'll get there.
I can't wait. I can't wait, man. Tell me. Okay. We're getting a car soon here. And
yeah, there you go.
All I've ever done is just buy the car. I've never considered a lease, because when I go to read the websites that say, should you lease or should you buy? I'm like, this is stupid. Like, I don't want to read this. And then I just buy it.
Okay.
What do I need to know about? Like, why should I lease a car?
So first of all, it's important that our boy C Funk Beans in the chat room is starting to sing the Cars for Kids commercial. And so I think we might need to block him for that.
Cars for Kids.
You know that damn commercial.
I know I'm trying to put it together in my head. What is it? Sing it.
Cars for Kids.
Cars for Kids. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Now that's stuck in my head all day. Thanks, Beans.
So here's the number aspect of things. And actually, financially, buying the car is still the superior option. However, the lease basically draws everything out longer and creates lower monthly payments for a longer series of time. It's almost like you're willing to pay a tiny bit more interest is effectively what ends up happening, but you can stretch out a financing. Most car places will let you finance a car for 5 or 6 years. That's usually the max. With a lease, when you combine that with a finance option at the end of the lease, if you so desire, you can basically stretch it out to like 9 years. So the payments drop by about 30% or so for us. And don't worry, people, we're going to get into fantasy sports. We're letting you guys file into the auditorium here. We know how college classes go.
Some of us, Dan. Some of us.
Just because our eyes were bloodshot, we were there, baby. We were listening. So for us, my wife is now an actual attending physician, so things have changed a little bit. But medical training takes a long, long time. And you're basically just like dipping into the red that entire period, while I was making millions of dollars working for a minor league baseball company or organization. So for us, it was actually really important to have the low monthly payments, and that was what a lease could afford. Because by the end of the lease, you probably pay like about half to 60% of the car's value. But it's not a one-to-one thing. So at the end of the lease, a lot of that was interest, and so the car's still worth 60%. So there's going to be a little bit over the top. Also, changing family sizes makes leasing kind of good, because at the end of 3 years, you can start into a new thing and you're not locked into car payments for 6 years on an automobile that won't fit for us, a 1-year-old and a dog, and then a couple years down the line, potentially another child. So that's been kind of nice to be able to rotate cars every couple of years. I think this is one we'll probably end up buying, simply because, once you've got children and beasts to load into the back seat, they don't just disappear. And that was the purpose of starting this car lease. So at the end of the lease, you can still finance the car. You can still buy it. Dealerships love it, because if you turn the car back in, they can resell it for a ton of money. And people like it because the monthly payments are lower. If you have the money to just go buy a car, that's what you should do, because then you're not paying any interest on it. And effectively, interest is sort of wasted dollars. So, I mean, what do you have?
Buying a car, to me, is a bad decision just in general. I mean, they lose so much value so quickly.
Yeah.
And it feels like they're going to get more out of date quicker now that technology is such a big part of it. Like, I bought a, 10 years ago, a Honda Accord, and it was great. It was awesome. Everybody would just say, nice car. They thought it was a Beamer because they basically stole kind of a Beamer design. And then, it has the navigation and all that built into it, but it's completely useless now, as far as the new technology, the Bluetooth and the wireless, and, basically just kind of being, connected.
Lease. Yeah. I mean, that's another sort of check mark in the lease box. But I mean, if you own a car, it's worth something. It's not, I mean, obviously it depreciates, but not to zero generally, unless you're talking about like a 95 Ford Taurus, which was basically worthless after you take it off the lot.
I mean, like, so like selling this car 10 years later, yeah, I'm going to pocket maybe like $7,000 or something off of it if I sell it. I mean, at some rate, they become almost more valuable as just being able to get you to point A and point B without having to worry about, okay, well, I got to go buy a new car now. You know, why would you sell a car for like $2,000? You know, you can spend $2,000 in a weekend.
Like a down. Yeah, it's really the down payment on the next lease or next car. But in my mind, and you know, I'm kind of like, it's weird actually. I'm a big numbers guy, but I'm really, when it comes to like sports betting, I'm much more about watching the actual game. I'm a very hard numbers guy when it comes to these things. So the fact that I had a Subaru Impreza lease where, you know, I sunk like $6,000 to $7,000 in lease payments into that car and got literally nothing out of it other than the use of an automobile, that felt foolish to me. Whereas if you do that and then you buy the car at the end of it, you could probably trade that thing in minus the loan cost to like a car resale place, and you probably still get something back on it. So that's the advantage.
You're basically saying the upside is that you get lower payments and you get to trade it in for a new one. Yeah. And you pay a little bit more.
Over the long haul, yes, you will pay more. But in the
I like the trading it in thing.
Getting a new car every 3 years is pretty sweet. You get the new tech. The problem is that like Honda basically just came out yesterday and told us, by the way, we ended up with a Honda CRV. I know a lot of people were asking me about that. The EXL model, which is like 2 packages up, because it's got the fake leather seats. And when you have children/dogs, you need something that's not going to hold the goop. So Honda basically said they basically redesign their cars like once every 6 years. So getting one new every 3 might not actually be the most important thing unless there's a massive tech breakthrough, which you reserve the right to do that. You don't have to choose if you're buying the car until the end of the lease. So there's that aspect also.
Well, I'm fascinated by this discussion, Dan. I'm sure all of the viewers are as well. I mean, you don't just come to Fantasy NBA today for the advice. You come for the discussion on lease versus buy decisions.
We're pleased. We're pleased with it. We're pleased with the automobile. Honda's a little bit more expensive than if we had gone Subaru or Mazda, which is the other options at the end. But it fit everything better. It's just like overall, it's just a better car. And it had 5-star safety ratings, front, back, sides, all that stuff. Almost every other one of those crossovers had 1 4-star. And there was 0 chance my wife was going to let us get one that had a 4-star on it. And I actually don't blame her on that one. Want to talk some fantasy hoops?
I'm quickly looking up what you almost wrapped the lyrics to front and back, side to side from UGK, the Underground Kings, 1994. I knew I knew that song.
Oh man, yeah, that's that's a good one. I wish I had the foresight. I wish I had the foresight to wrap that in there. All right, I guess we can do this thing. You ready, Brew?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today live on YouTube. I love the fact that we have 10 minutes of pre-show banter that like 20 to 30 people get a chance to hear. And it's amazing because really like we're into we've got 4 figures of people that listen to this show over the weekend, and like 1% of them know that we spent 10 minutes talking about crossover SUVs before the show started. I am Dan Besbris, and of course it is Friday, which means it's our live show. It's on YouTube. You should watch it next time if you're not doing it this time. El Arquitecto leaning into the camera to stretch his neck and back because he is a wreck these days. The great Aaron Bruski, how are you feeling on a scale? We should do the pain scale in hospitals, right? 1 to 10, what's your pain like right now?
I'm at about a 6. And for the listeners, I'm not erect. Just to throw that out there.
You are you've had a rough week. You've seen some people, they've popped some limbs, they've readjusted some
Yeah, you'd be surprised what you like at a chiropractor, kind of like what that's like. If anybody's got their neck cracked out there, it's kind of like the movies where the death blow is like one of these like, the whole neck snap thing. But that's what they do to you at a chiropractor. But it feels great. It helps out. No, I don't wish this on my worst enemy, but it's getting a little bit better day by day, and just in time, because my God, I think this trade deadline I don't want to oversell it, but I think that it's going to be better than what we've seen in the last couple of years.
It's already been fun. There's already been stuff, and we're going to get into that momentarily. Follow at Aaron Bruski on Twitter, at Dan Besbris, and at Hoopball Fantasy, not to mention, Brew, since the last time you and I spoke, we have a brand new team Twitter account here at Hoopball. It was in the works last Friday because we were already talking about Jack's fine work covering the Blazers, but now there is an actual account you can follow. It is at Hoopball Blazers. And I'm not saying, but I am saying, since Hoopball Blazers Twitter became a thing, I don't think Portland's lost.
No, they haven't, have they?
Yeah.
It's not Jack's great writing in play. Now, he's really good at what he does. I'm glad that we brought him on. And, that's kind of the vision here, is to get 30 teams rocking and rolling like that, like the Kings, like the Lakers, the Wolves. My God, Kevin Brand is just killing it. So that's what we're looking to do here. So I'm very pleased with that. And, we got this trade deadline stuff. I keep looking at our new Hoopball site, and they keep adding more stuff. And so I keep getting happier and happier with that. So all things are moving, and I'm actually a little bummed, and I'll tell you why here, is that Greg Monroe got traded to the Celtics.
Yeah,
I thought we were going to have it real good this year.
Everything was coming up the Besbris bunch for a little bit there.
I mean, could you imagine if he landed in New Orleans? That just would have been the perfect trade deadline right off the bat. So, we'll talk about that. But
we got one. And we're pretty pleased with that one. I have a list, Brew, and it's a good one this week.
Yeah, I figured.
Oh, boy. We got the chat room. It's rocking and rolling. I've been cutting and pasting all of this stuff into a Word document. So the stuff that you guys posted at 7:30 or 8 this morning, don't worry. It's still there. I still have it. But it is going to be difficult because there's always a lot of stuff, and I got to sift through the non-questions for the questions. That is the second half of today's show. The first half is Dan's questions. I got stuff I got to bug Brew about. Most of it good. Couple of things maybe not what you'd consider great. But overall, it's been a fun week for fantasy owners, unless you have John Wall or Kevin Love. Those are probably the two fantasy owners that are not super thrilled right now. So why don't we just start on that side? I've spoken to a few really interesting guests this week, actually, and kind of been able to pick their brains on a lot of these injuries. And the consensus so far, Brew, and of course, feel free to completely disagree with all this. The consensus is that it seems like in both cases, the fantasy value just sort of showers across the rest of the team. It's almost like everybody else just got to step into one of those money chambers and grab as many dollar bills as they can. So far with John Wall out, we've seen more Otto Porter, more Markieff Morris, more Bradley Beal, and then sort of a point guard timeshare. With Kevin Love, we've seen more Jay Crowder. We've seen more Channing Frye. We've seen more Tristan Thompson. We've seen more Dwayne Wade. On either of these teams, Brew, is any one guy really going to step up and be the man in their absences?
I don't know about the man, but I think Washington had quite a bit of value, that money chamber you're speaking of, and an actual pickup too, a couple, I guess, pickups, but a real legitimate pickup in Markieff Morris, who needed that boost to get up over that late round hump. And he's going to do that, I think. I would say it's almost a lock that he's going to do that, injuries notwithstanding, but I don't think the injuries are on the radar right now. So that's good for him. And then Satoransky, I think, is going to have that low end appeal, might have a little bit more value in certain formats that are less concerned with the lack of money counting stats. Then Otto Porter is actually going to just go off. He's been ready for this. I mean, you saw glimpses of it earlier in the year. when he jumped out to a fast start, and he's capable of handling the usage. So I think that's a really big deal. Obviously, Beal's going to go off. And I don't know about Marcin Gortat. He's also been on that cut line, and he benefits a lot from what Wall does on these easy little dump-off passes and the penetration, freeing him for offensive rebounds and the like. The steals and the blocks have been the problem for him. And I don't know if he's capable at this point of changing that dynamic. So, but he'll definitely have more opportunities as well. So Washington, I thought it was, more beneficiaries, more value that's actually being seen in fantasy leagues. Whereas in Cleveland, I do think the Kevin Love injury is actually going to help them as a team. Love is one of the most overrated players in the NBA. Defensively, he's a sieve. He's not really creating a lot for other players. His gravity, even, from that perspective, is questionable when you consider he's not always getting the ball or even really in a position to make the defense pay with the gravity that he brings to the table. They've had trouble, like watching the Cavs play has been watching like a team that's never played with each other before, because frankly, they really haven't. And so they actually don't even know where to stand on a basketball floor offensively. And that's why you've seen all of this trouble. So when you take a player like Love, who does need touches and, deserves touches, that I think is going to be an addition by subtraction situation for guys like Isaiah Thomas, LeBron. And I think they'll be able to work out the tempo issues a lot faster there. So that's good news for them overall as a team. They've got issues, though. Tristan Thompson looks lethargic out there. J.R. Smith looks like he can't play right now. And then when it comes to the fantasy value side of it, Jay Crowder would be the kind of the more obvious beneficiary, but we don't know what they're going to do at the trade deadline. They look to be buyers, obviously. And so if they add a George Hill, I think that takes any sort of additional value that Jay Crowder would receive or Dwayne Wade that he would receive and sort of negates that. And even if they don't add anybody, Crowder hasn't looked great this year. And then as far as Wade goes, he takes games off, basically whenever. So it's really hard to deploy him in a weekly league and in a daily league. It's not even all that valuable in the first place. So I think that the Cavs are actually a situation where that value just sort of dissipated.
You mentioned Markieff Morris. I figure we can use that to segue to the Morris twins brief discussion here. This one probably one of the shorter topics we'll cover on today's show. Markieff has looked pretty darn good lately. Marcus has actually looked pretty darn good lately. He got hurt in the Celtics' last ball game, and he's out tonight with a bruised hip, although I believe I read a tweet where he actually described it as a bruised butt instead of a bruised hip. He had 20 points in 19 minutes before getting hurt in that game, and he does fill some kind of void for Boston, more than I expected, believe it or not. On an earlier podcast this week or last week, I coined I think I coined the term having a Morris, which was 13 points and 6 rebounds, but he might actually be able to do more than have a Morris on a nightly basis on a team that actually does need some scoring. Is there any way Marcus Morris, when healthy, can actually maintain 12-team value? He's getting close.
I think no. And I think it's because the Celtics front court is pretty stocked right now. Aaron Baines is having a year that I think people will notice it in the playoffs. They won't notice it until then. I wouldn't want to play against that guy. And I don't think anybody likes playing against that guy. I mean, he just delivers punishment out there. And in the playoffs, that's going to show up big time. I don't think his minutes are going away. They just add Greg Monroe. So I don't know. We'll talk about Monroe, but I don't know if he's going to get consistent minutes or what. That's really going to be a question for the coach. And I think that the rest of the rotation there, you got Tice. He's been playing very well. And I don't know that you really want to pull him off the court. So it could be a big, kind of 4-man timeshare. And then you got Tatum that's going to play some 4. I think the only way that Greg Monroe has value is if they decide that Tatum's just strictly a 3 and they're going to run those 2 big guys out there, run Monroe out there with second unit so he can be kind of the quarterback of the scoring side of the second unit. And then you're playing Tatum at 3. Tatum, of course, is destroying 4s because he can get to the rim like a guard. And I don't know that they want to do that. So they might hedge and they might make Monroe a specialist and spot start him in certain places. And at the same time, to answer your question on Morris, they're so thin behind Brown and Tatum that it's possible if anything happens to either one of those guys or just in general, maybe he can keep 25 minutes per game. And if he does, I think he'll have some kind of low end value. I don't think he's going to get the minutes, though, to be able to crank it up higher than that. And also, he's an injury risk himself.
You mentioned Greg Monroe. He is officially moving to the Celtics. We got word on that this morning. That's a little bit of a letdown. Feels like we can probably throw him back into the trash heap. There's a lot of guys popping up right now, and it feels, to me at least, like that roster spot would be better used on someone else. Do you agree or disagree?
It depends on the league. I think in a lot of 12-team leagues, what you're saying is probably true. And if you get down to 14-team leagues, I think what he potentially brings to the table might warrant hanging on at least through the deadline, but also just to kind of get a sense of what Boston intends to do there. He's not in great shape. He's going to have to play his way into shape. And I mean, if I'm Boston, I probably want him playing at minimum 18 minutes a night just because I don't want him to fall out of shape. It's kind of a curious pickup there if you're the Celtics. I mean, yeah, you can hire a gun to come off the bench, and it's not a bad thing. But he is a player that sort of changes the dynamic of everybody around him. So you don't just bring that into the equation without thinking long-term on it. I'm going to tell folks, you should try to hold him through at least this next sort of like 3-day news cycle when we might get some insight as to where and how he will be deployed. Because think of this. This is a passing big man that rebounds, that can score.
I think we may have just lost Bruski. It seems like maybe his power might have even gone out on that one. So we'll see what's taken place on that. Indeed, he has left the live chat. That's what you get for talking about Greg Monroe in a positive sense. So in the meantime here, while we wait for Aaron to get back on the mix, I am, for those of you that are listening after the fact, the recorded podcast will likely not have this segment in it, but we're live right now, so I can't remove that bad boy from YouTube. Quick preview on what we got coming up on the show when Aaron gets back in. We're going to be talking about the Miles Turner's return, Jared Allen, Torian Prince's struggles, Nico Mirotic, of course, of the Pelicans. My next topic was to talk about the Phoenix Suns, since we now officially know Greg is gone. Tyson Chandler saw pretty good minutes in that first game with no Alex Len. We've seen Josh Jackson getting himself involved in like third chucker banana in Phoenix. The Kings outlook, the Grizzlies outlook, the Orlando Magic outlook, and then we will, of course, discredit the ridiculous ESPN story about LeBron and the Warriors, and that's all coming up momentarily. Bruski, welcome back. Seems like your power went out.
I don't know what happened. I just talked to myself about Greg Monroe for 10 minutes.
Welcome back.
What did you miss? Was it like everything?
No, we actually got a pretty good chunk of it. You were talking about Greg Monroe being a passing big man that rebounds, and then things basically sputtered out.
In 10 seconds or less, he could be a perfect fit in Brad Stevens' offense. I'm not going to drop him at least for 3 to 4 days until I get a chance to figure out what's going on there in the news cycle. And I'm probably going to hold him beyond that just to see exactly where this goes.
If somebody pops up that's, white hot over the next 24 hours, is that a reason you might say, all right, Greg, I was going to give you 3 days as long as news didn't change, but with this breaking story, he's a guy that
I think maybe feed me some names as we go here, because I think it depends on the player.
Yeah, so we're going to hit a few here.
Like Satoransky, no.
Yeah, no.
Nah. Markieff Morris, I might even balk at that because I don't think his upside's probably top 75. It's probably more like top 80, top 90.
I like Markieff. I'm a Markieff liker.
He could go top 75.
I like that he's like a lunatic. I love the lunatics of the NBA. I'm the soft spot for them. Well, the next place we were going to go, and I was telling the listeners what's on the docket here, so it's not a surprise. The Phoenix Suns, because Greg Monroe is now officially gone. Alex Len is officially hurt, or we certainly would have seen him by now. And Tyson Chandler played pretty heavy minutes in that first game where he was the only center left. But in typical Tyson Chandler fashion, didn't really do anything. But who did do stuff? Marquise Chris played well. And third chucker banana, Josh Jackson, actually played relatively well. Although he's, we've seen that he can go real cold and not a big defensive stats guy. Anybody that's popping out in Phoenix, like could Alex Len cut through? We've heard from people this week that Big Sauce, maybe like a 1 month stash here, but he's coming back off a big knee injury. So that's going to be like 12 minutes, 14 minutes, 16 minutes, 18 minutes. You might get like 2-3 weeks out of Big Sauce in a best case scenario.
Yeah, I worry about Big Sauce. I mean, to get into game shape, I mean, he does look like a classic play him in April type of a guy, but I don't know that you're holding right now for Big Sauce. And we're huge Big Sauce fans here. So, yeah, not down with that. You worry about Alex Len, though you do kind of footnote this ankle injury as maybe they're holding him out in advance of the trade deadline. So, because I don't think he's a big part of their plans going forward. So that might be the case there. You get a lot of Alex Len questions, and I do think that if he survives in Phoenix, he's kind of somebody that you want to have on your radar. Will you stash him right now? I think he's probably. I mean, I wouldn't drop Greg Monroe for him. That's for sure. So he's lower than that on the stash radar. I think though the big news out of Phoenix is, so say Len can't get healthy, say Len does get traded, say that the Suns don't bring anything back in the front court, you're really looking at a massive opportunity for Marquise Chris, who I would drop Greg Monroe for. And he's, already proven it in this last game that he can just kind of spark up at a moment's notice, as could many NBA players. And the upside
Zach Randolph.
I think he's just a reference for the United States in general. The opportunity for Dragon Bender is there. He's been terrible. But he has these games that sort of show you, like, if he gets confidence, if he, gets maybe more to be a focal point, that he has the length to get steals, get blocks, hit threes, and he can put up, probably he will have a 5x5 at some point in his career, not knowing if he'll be good in his career, but he might just have that one game that he lives off of for the rest of his career. Then Josh Jackson is somebody that I've been watching closely lately. A lot of hoopball teams have good percentages, and so that's an area that he really gets dragged down by. So if your team fits that build and you can survive, he's a chucker. He's hilarious. And Jay Triano, I swear to God, they were up by like 10 with like 2.5 minutes to go, about to close out. I think it was against the Mavs. And Jackson comes down with like the triple crossover, fade away, jump pass. Like I think I'm open. And then, I'm not open. I better pass this. And he just passes the other team for a layup. And Triano looked like no other coach I've ever seen, just like saw red. And so Jackson's going to, challenge Triano, but he's also a guy that I think can pick up a ton of stats in garbage time. And he'd be somebody that I wouldn't drop Greg Monroe for him, but I'd rather own him than Alex Len right now. So that's Phoenix got interesting with all of the developments. I mean, Isaiah Cannon with his injury, and thoughts and prayers out to him. Hopefully he can make a comeback. That was just brutal. But now they got to bring other players into the fold, and that's going to mean guys like Chris and Bender. And if you don't have Len, and then Chandler, man, that guy could get injured at any point in time. So a lot of opportunity for Suns players that have been disappointing to date.
Let's talk a couple of potential stash opportunities. And you know me, I have the sign outside my treehouse that says "No Kings Allowed," and I've had a smaller sign that's like written in Sharpie tacked on to the professionally made king sign that says, "And no Grizz either."
Don't say that now.
So now things have gotten funky in Memphis, and things have gotten a little funky in Sacramento too. And I got to figure out which of these signs I can leave on my treehouse. Memphis is deploying a lot of young dudes, and they are inconsistent, not unexpectedly. The Kings wanted to deploy a bunch of young dudes, and then they all got hurt, and so the old guys had to come back and play. What do we make of this leading up to the trade deadline? Like, who could potentially get moved? The George Hill stuff still on the table in Sacramento. Andrew Harrison playing some point guard, but of course, I mean, they might play Mario Chalmers when he comes back. I don't know for sure. Wayne Selden went huge and then went small. Dylan Brooks feels like sort of the safe plotter play in Memphis. I don't know. This is a team that I've largely avoided this year. So tell me what I'm missing.
First of all, you have a treehouse. I think that's probably the top line of that little rant you just did.
My fantasy team is a treehouse. My fantasy team is a metaphorical treehouse.
I'm working on a Marge Simpson, like, you know, as you make your good points.
Me and everything is coming up Millhouse these days, Brew. Everything is coming up Millhouse.
Appreciate all of what we got going on here for you guys. So the Kings, yeah, Scal, the shoulder thing's real. Like, he got hit about 5 days ago. I forget it. I think it was the Grizzlies. He will be held out through the All-Star break, if I had to guess. And that's good for him. And it's actually good for owners, too, because I think that will allow the Kings to sort out a lot of this trade deadline stuff. You won't be tempted, okay, do I need to start him or not? Was doing pretty good there for a bit. And I do think he's somebody that you want to stash. Now, I probably don't drop Greg Monroe for him just yet, because I feel like you could probably wait this out and layer this. Like, you can hold Greg Monroe for a week, see where it goes, and then still have a crack at picking up Scal, because I don't think there's a lot of faith in Scal in the marketplace right now. As for the rest of the Kings, you got, I think, some pretty good clarity going forward. I mean, we've, for months, it feels like, told you Buddy Hield, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Bogdanovich. And Buddy Hield's the one that it feels like maybe he could have been dropped in some leagues. Really kind of just up and down and not good lately. But he's still a top 100 play in very low minutes. And he's a guy that they're going to want to get going for the rest of the year. So I think he has top 50 upside. You got Bogdanovich, who I think is going to basically get the car keys. And so I think he'll be a guy that probably has top 100. He has some stat set issues. Probably top 75, actually. I want to be accurate with this. Stat set issues, you know, as far as the steals and the blocks go, but I think everything else will be in a good spot. And then Willie Cauley-Stein, he is a little bit of a health risk, but he's also going to be a big piece of what they do. So they're now actually clear, I think, in Sacramento. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox is going to be somebody that should be owned as well. So I think fantasy-wise, they'll stop being such a terrible team. And then as far as Memphis goes, I've been really paying attention a lot lately to what's going on there, because somebody has to play. The guy that I think is a must-own is Harrison. He's had trouble with percentages, and even the stat set can be a little bit light, but he's the kind of the one guy that you can count on to get minutes there going forward, absent something that happens with the trade. I do think they'll try to play Mario Chalmers as much as possible to add a little bit of veteran leadership to that lineup, but he can't really stay healthy, and he's not that good. So he'll have his spurts, but I think Harrison will be a constant. Selden's been a guy that last year, if you look back at April, he was getting 30 minutes per game, so it makes sense that he gets minutes. Now, the stat set is the issue there. I've seen a lot of hype about him as being kind of like the guy to pick up, and then Harrison's been poo-pooed. It's backwards. You know, Harrison's the guy to pick up, and then Selden has question marks as to whether, even if he's having big games, can he maintain any reasonable standard league value? So that's a question. You nailed the Dylan Brooks stuff. JaMychal Green can't stay healthy. So I think Jarrell Martin is probably more interesting to me, since Green is a low upside guy. And I think the other takeaway here with that lineup is that Marc Gasol looks thin. Like, he actually looks like somebody that could carry on for the rest of the season. I don't know what's happened with him. It's like he's changed his diet or something, but he's in shape. And if he doesn't get traded, then I think he could completely make it through the rest of the year health-wise, you know, just based on what he looks like. And then the question there becomes, if he does get traded, A, what do they bring back and how does it impact people? But you're looking at Deontay Davis. I think Jarrell Martin then becomes a must-add player. They just don't have any guys. And so you want to be paying attention to what goes on in Memphis, because somebody's got to get the numbers.
Couple of interesting notes here. Miles Turner appears to be
the buy low recommendation, Miles Turner.
Yeah, what do we think we can get out of him rest of season? I guess is the simple way to ask that question.
Well, he sure showed a great stat line his last time out. And I think that, you know, it's been a rough go for him this year, and he hasn't had any chance to get any consistency going. He's stepped into a situation where it's kind of a guard-heavy offense. Victor Oladipo's been great. Collison's been great. And so, he hasn't had his chance to get his rhythm, and I think that the team is going to look at that. I also think the team could easily trade Darren Collison, and that would then almost force Miles Turner to be what people thought they were getting on draft day. The last blurb when he was questionable for his knee, I wrote that blurb, and I basically said, look, guys, this doesn't feel right. It feels terrible. It's a risky situation, but this is as good as it gets from a buy low perspective. I mean, he's probably being valued out there in the marketplace as a top 40, top 50 guy, but he's got top 15 upside. If I had to peg his value rest of season, of course, an injury could come and throw this off, but I really think that top 25 is a safe recommendation for his last 35 games.
Nico, I held off as long as I could. You got to give me credit for pushing him this far down on the list. This is like I should have had a bottle of Andre to celebrate here.
That's why I'm bummed, man. If Monroe hit, what kind of party are we having at Hoop Ball?
That would have been. There ain't no party like a hoop ball party. But we gotta get your ball hooped. I did not buy the cheapest champagne at Ralph's. I did not get a bottle of Andre to celebrate Nico to the Pelicans, but damn, that's a good landing spot. He's already sitting top 45 in 24 minutes in Chicago, in a place where he literally got punched in the face by a teammate. Not metaphorically punched in the face. He was actually punched in the face.
I'm telling you, man, this season's so weird.
Is it finally time? We've paid our dues for Nico to roll in there and be the only other big man in New Orleans. I mean, they listen to the. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a big factor on that team, and he's going to grab a ton of rebounds with no Boogie around. But the other big men, maybe I shouldn't even make it plural. It's like Dante Cunningham, and then nobody else can really play the 4 or 5.
This could devolve. This is why the Greg Monroe thing is really interesting. Monroe could have gone to New Orleans and reestablished his value on the marketplace so easily, put up big numbers, and he's chosen to go kind of play for a championship with no guarantees on playing time. So that just is interesting kind of from a non-fantasy perspective, but they don't have anybody to play in New Orleans if the guy that gets injured every other night gets hurt. I mean, you can't play Nico at the 5, but you might be forced to at some point, for limited stretches if anything happens to Anthony Davis. This is an amazing Nico. I mean, theoretically, if Anthony Davis goes down, he could be a top 25 player. Yeah. So that is that's a phenomenal situation for hoop ball owners who all went through crap and hell, and and we'll see what it looks like as far as end of season value goes, because obviously those missed games do matter, but it's a very good, great development. A lot of questions in the forums about who should I be trading for Nico? I think you set a top 50 floor for him in your evaluation, and you probably crank it up to top 35, as far as what you think his upside would be, and then trade accordingly.
This could be fun. The Pelicans, a wildly up-tempo offense. They're just a stat factory out there that doesn't play any defense. Guess what?
Another underrated aspect here is he played with Rondo.
He loved him.
The second unit all got on very well there. So there's actually a little piece of chemistry there as well. And Anthony Davis doesn't want to be a dominant kind of go-to scorer, got to hold the ball every game. They're going to bring him in, and I think he's just going to let it fly. It's going to be awesome.
I'm pretty excited, especially in a roto format. Obviously, the fact that he's missed all these games has been a bit of a downer. If you've got Nico in a head-to-head league right now, you may want to invest in a better bottle of champagne than the Andre I'm getting later today, because this is sprint to the finish. Plus, we already know Nico loves the month of March. He's just counting down the days, baby. Another really interesting recent development, Mr. Jared Allen, and some of the coolest hair in the NBA, managed to not only win the starting job one night, but eclipse 24 minutes the next night. He okay, so let me be a little bit of the Debbie Downer on Jared Allen also before we all get super excited about it. Yes, he is a very interesting young player, and yes, there's a lot thrown around about like massive blocks potential. His per 36s on blocks is not that great this year. It's like 2, which, as I've talked about on podcasts before, when you do per 36s, that actually tends to be more of like the pipe dream for low minute guys because their numbers.
Yeah, there's a fade there.
But all that being said, he's obviously a more interesting fantasy player than Jahlil Okafor. Tyler Zeller has been bumped from the rotation. The fact that they've gone to a 2-center thing where one guy in Jared Allen is just a better team player, it feels like he has the room to grow here. So I like him. I just maybe don't like him as much as people that think he's going to block 4 shots a night.
No, he's not blocking 4 shots a night, but he's got that sort of, I mean, if he can learn defensive principles, the length and the leaping abilities there. So there is a little bit of hidden upside in those numbers. But yeah, you're right. Not as good as what a lot of people are saying. He's a must-add player, in my opinion. And so that really stops the discussion. I mean, if you want to talk trade value, how high can he go? He could go pretty high because if Jahlil Okafor's knee acts up, then he would theoretically be the only center that they want to play. But that said, they want to play Quincy AC at center. AC's had some interesting lines. He's not worth a pickup. Don't worry about that. But then, they can bring Zeller back and forth. I think they're going to give him as many minutes as they want to give him, not sort of just let him go. That's not their style there. Even for their good players like Spencer Dinwiddie took forever to get up over 30 minutes. And I guess, do you want me to circle around the rest of that group? Because I think, D'Angelo Russell's line was noteworthy. I think he kind of showed that he has that capability again, and that the knee's not extremely major, at least at this point in time. I mean, the wear and tear could add up there. He's definitely maintaining his must-own cred. Spencer Dinwiddie's been great. I think we've pretty much led the charge on that one. Karis LeVert is going to be a guy that's going to be underneath the cut line. And Rondé Hollis-Jefferson being out is actually a big deal as well because he takes so many shots, not from a volume standpoint, but every time he touches the ball, it goes up. And so that changes, I think, the way that the offense runs is one of the reasons why D'Angelo Russell can come in there and have as many shot attempts as he did in like 17 minutes or whatever.
The thing I was excited about on Jared Allen was the 12 rebounds, because the rebounding had been lower, and it was good to see him sort of go get a few.
Well, I mean, look, if you're going to play either AC or Rondé Hollis-Jefferson at the 4, I mean, somebody his size should be out there getting that many rebounds. Not that many every night in that amount of minutes, but really that's not a great rebounding look for a team. And one of the reasons that the guards come back and get rebounds and things like that. So, I mean, Jared Allen, I think I want to probably peg at minimum a top 100 on him, maybe even a top 75.
I got to do the bad one too, though. We've had a lot of fun stuff going on. Torian Prince hit rock bottom in that last.
I look at that as good news.
He got dropped in a bunch of leagues, which means I can probably go grab him and stick him.
I dropped into the forums and I was like, hey guys, he's got top 80 value and he's really kind of only going up from there. He needs the all-star break in the worst way. And they were like, drop him.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I can understand people wanting, because that last game was like the ultimate clunker.
I'm signed on for all of the warts. It's like he's aloof. Bud constantly has to put him in his place. He sometimes dogs it, like all those things. Like I'm signed on for all of that, and I feel like he's gonna learn how to work through that stuff. He's a turnover machine. Like they give him the ball, and he drives, and oh my god, I got picked again, shocker. So I'm like actually on board with all the warts, but like you just can't ignore. It was like when Kelly Olynyk was Kelly Olynyk earlier in the year, and I was like, the math. Everybody, the math, like we can't just drop this guy. Look at the math. And then it was like add water, and Kelly Olynyk now has jumped up into this position where you want to own him. And, same thing with Torian Prince. Like he's been a top 80 guy, top 85 guy. Like you don't want to drop that when that's at its low point. You just want to acknowledge that he sucks right now. He had a finger injury that has coincided with a lot of the dip. So it's possible that that's been underreported on. And, you know, you got this breakup coming where he gets a week to recharge. This guy's played a lot of minutes for a young player, you know, that didn't play a lot last year. You know, he's probably working through a little bit of that rookie wall type thing. And, you know, at the same time, Bud's saying, look, man, you can't dog it out here. I would call him a must-add player if he gets dropped. And you want to target him in trades right now. And you can get him for a song, I think, as a throw-in in a deal.
And believe it or not, we're not alone in that one. Most fantasy sites agree that he's a hold because we all can see the future for Atlanta is not some of the other guys. Ersan Ilyasova, probably not going to play a ton of minutes after the deadline. Dwayne Dedmon. And I know that they're not necessarily the same position on the floor, but these things all trickle down. And it does look
game by Marco that corresponded with that game.
Another possible trade. He seems actually like the most likely traded guy for Atlanta.
Oh yeah, I mean, both of those two that you named, Ersan and Marco, would be trade candidates.
I'm pretty thrilled. I'm thrilled that he got dropped in a league that I'm in. I think I'm probably going to put a waiver claim on it. I know some of you are in that league with me, so you'll probably take him from under my nose. Last thing here before we get to questions, just because it's stupid. ESPN put out a story overnight that LeBron is going to meet with the Warriors and then tried to back it up by saying, well, they're, you know, the lead horse. LeBron came out today and called it ridiculous. Can we take a shot at the worldwide leader for just like the ultimate overnight clickbait effort? That smelled funky.
Yeah, well, you know, Chris Haynes is the guy that he wrote it, and I've kind of, I don't know Chris, but I know kind of talked to him on Twitter or whatever. Like, he's not that guy. Like, and you've seen everybody that's talked about this story. It's not Chris. It's the editors that let that story run. And then you also have to understand that that story doesn't happen without somebody in LeBron's camp putting it out there, wanting it to happen, and probably doing it without LeBron's consent, because they know LeBron would never want that to come out. But at the same time, they know that he will benefit by putting this out, saying, hey, you know, to the team, to Dan Gilbert, you know, to the league at large, like, if this doesn't get better, then I'm out. And prepping people for that notion, because if it doesn't get better, you should leave if you're LeBron James. You're not connected to Cleveland, you know, as a mandatory thing. Like, the way that Dan Gilbert got rid of David Griffin, nobody in the league likes that. Nobody in the league likes Dan Gilbert anyway. And so, you know, what's happened there since then is you got a lot of people connected to the team that are just trying to kind of, I think, bring it down. Cavs have always been like that, or any team that LeBron plays for, is the league tries to bring him down as a story. Some of it is deserved, some of it is not. And by the way, you're adding a massive piece in Isaiah Thomas, and he just got off of a major hip injury, and people are expecting that to work within the first 2 weeks. Like, this is basketball 101, people. Like, that's why the stories that come out, you know, that talk about, you know, Isaiah's defense or whatever, you know, that Isaiah is not a good fit for this team. Like, anybody that writes that story or kind of buys that narrative, I really question their basketball intelligence, because we're seeing it all across the league every year. When you add an important player to a mix, it takes forever for this stuff to come together. LeBron James is the king of having long periods where you integrate players. Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh had these problems. You know, the list goes on, and you look at them play, and you've kind of got LeBron wanting to quarterback the team as he has for the last 2 months, you know, or basically the entire season, where he's really bucked his career-long trends and been a top 3 fantasy guy for a long stretch there, because he has done everything for them. You don't go from doing everything to then kind of bringing Kyrie Irving back in the form of Isaiah Thomas. They kind of stand in the same passing lanes, and the teammates don't even know where to stand. And some of these offensive sets are so bad that you just can't even assess any of these players, because they've got to figure out, I stand here, you stand here. So that's where they're at, I think, as a team, as an organization. I think that this is classic February Cavs stuff. And let's talk after the break, as we get into mid or late February and early March. Let's see if that narrative has changed a little bit. And we'll see if Cold Takes Exposed, or whatever they're called, has any good ones for the public.
Let's take some questions. That was good. Thank you, Brew. That was a nice little moment there. I got to whittle down some of the chat room stuff into some questions. Actor and producer over here. Let's turn to the chat room. Lady Chatterley's Lover had the first question in the chat room. We're ranked for the rest of season. Let's see.
Was that Lady Chatterley's Lover?
That is the one. Got the first two questions in fact. Rank rest of season the following 4 players, Mr. Aaron Bruski: James Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, Torian Prince, and Rondé Hollis Jefferson.
Ooh, that's a great list right there. If RHJ is healthy, I think he jumps to the top of that list. He's been, great for them. I think one of the more underrated young players in the league. Health is a huge concern there. James Johnson, I'm glad that we get a little chance to talk about him. Saw a lot of do I drop James Johnson stuff right after he got the steal and block, and it's picked up a little bit in that area. Not a lot, but, enough to make me wonder, okay, hey, is he getting healthy? Or is he getting more aggressive, or is something changing there? Because that's really been the big problem with him, is his aggressiveness, both sides of the ball. And he needs an all-star break, as much as anybody. So to rank these guys, I'll go, if RHJ's healthy, I'll go with him. And then I'm going to go with James Johnson right behind that. I'm going to go Kelly Olynyk at the bottom, and I will slide Prince right underneath James Johnson.
What is the impact of Jabari Parker on the rest of the Milwaukee Bucks?
Well, let's see what happens with Eric Bledsoe. I mean, that ankle injury has been lingering, but it's also a little too convenient around the trade deadline. They're a big team that I think. What's that?
And Malcolm Brogdon. Guys are dropping.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was where I was going to go to next is Brogdon. That doesn't sound great. I don't know if we've got an update here in the last hour, but he's basically been, when you hear pop that and he was down for so long, I think that could be a serious injury right there, which will change their dynamic on the trade deadline. And so, yeah, I think. I mean, what was the original question? We were looking at.
Jabari Parker's return.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, he's. I don't know. Prior to this, I was not that high on him because it's like, how's he going to get shots? He's had so many injuries. He was good in his last, return, but. This injury to Brogdon does help out, and then if there is a trade that could loosen him up, I'm not ready to give him top 50. I'm not ready to give him top 75 even. I think that he's worth owning. I'd probably peg him at top 100 going forward.
We got 6 names to rank on this one, so try to lightening this bad boy best you can. Markieff Morris is one of them. We've talked about him a little bit today. Wesley Matthews, the boss man, is that what they call him? Big boss man, Ed Davis.
Oh, yeah.
Josh Jackson, Buddy Hield, and Wayne Ellington are the last 3. So it's Markieff, Matthews, Ed Davis, Jackson, Hield, and Ellington.
Okay. Do we have a category, like 8 or 9?
Let's go 9.
All right. We're going to go with I'm going to put Hield at the top of the list, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I'm going to go with Markieff. I'll go Ed Davis. I'm going to throw Wes behind Markieff because I think it's more probable that he finishes in that order. Then give me Ed Davis, give me Ellington, and unfortunately, because of the percentages, you got to put Josh Jackson at the bottom.
Our boy Scott Douglas asking a question. I see what you're up to here, Scott. But I'm not going to preface it with anything. I'm going to ask it as he asked it. Jimmy Butler or Damian Lillard rest of season? Can Lillard keep up the good shooting percentage?
Give me Jimmy Butler.
That's probably what Scott wanted to hear. He and I are mulling a Jimmy Butler for Damian Lillard trade, and I have Dame and he has Jimmy. So Scott, I guess you're keeping your guy then. Tyler Braun asks, either Marquise Chris or Greg Monroe worth adding if I were dropping George Hill or Justin Holiday?
Chris is over Hill. no matter what.
So you got Chris, Holiday, Monroe.
Yeah, I think Holiday's going to be a top 80 guy for the rest of the year, and that makes him a hold over Greg Monroe. So so that I think is what the ranking is right there. Who is the other? Oh, Hill. Yeah, I think Hill is a guy that you want to stash. I'm glad that Hill got brought up here because he's somewhere between a top 75 to a top 125 guy based on where he lands. And so that top 75 is obviously nice, but I think he's probably you know what, Greg Monroe's too interesting in that Brad Stevens offense. I'm going to put Monroe over Hill. Hill's going to go to a team that's good, probably Cleveland. It's going to be tougher for him there. He would be a top 100 guy.
A few weeks ago, Brew mentioned trading Gary Harris for IT. Where do you sit on that side now?
Oh, yeah, still IT over Gary Harris. I mean, talk about top 20 upside here. And wait till that shooting regression kicks in. Wait till IT has a 49-point game, like either before or right after the trade deadline.
Yeah, he's starting to get the free throws going, which is like phase one that he's starting to beat his guy.
I'm glad you noticed that. That's key right there.
Who do you prefer for best long-term value? I assume that's a rest of season. Robert Portis or Jared Allen?
Give me Jared Allen because of the stat set. Portis is going to be – he's already been a good, solid late-round guy this year, which, I don't think that I was predicting that. So congrats to him. But he's I don't think he can go much higher as far as stat set goes. Jared Allen, though, on the other hand, if he theoretically got 28 minutes per game, that would be nice. So I'll go Jared Allen.
Are the Kings playing their veterans more just because the young guys are hurt, or is Dave Yeager doing something funny? Or not because he's not there, is someone else doing something funny?
I mean, Scal's won. I think that until the trade deadline comes and passes, they have a reason to play these guys. So I don't know that I've been as critical of them as anybody. And I think that you want to play Zach Randolph right now. I think you want to play George Hill right now. These are your two most likely guys to trade. I think you want Kosta Koufos to go out there and have that game that he had. So I'm not really down on them for that. I think this is why you don't bring all these players in the first place. But now that you're here, you got to trade those guys. If the Kings can't trade those guys, it will be a massive loss and mistake for them.
Any other stashes that you've thought about that we haven't brought up yet? I'm having trouble. Orlando, maybe one of the teams I didn't bring up. I tried to hit on a lot of them.
I don't know if there's a stash there per se.
That's fine. Let's move on to the next one. Come back.
Move to the next one. I'll get you some stashes.
If something hits you, if it
doesn't, list of stashes right here. Don't worry about it.
We got a lot that we've already thrown out there on the stash front. Guillermo, what's up, my man? Could you please rank the following rest?
That's a stash right there.
1, 2, 3, 4 names. Did you just find one?
No, well, you said Guillermo. That's Willie Hernan Gomez.
True, William.
Theoretically, that's a stash.
That is true.
On the lower end, way beneath George Hill.
Jared Allen, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, Alex Len, Skal Labissière, rest of season.
Well, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson's at the top of that, and then Jared Allen's probably right underneath him.
Guessing you got Skal ahead of Len?
Yeah, Skal and then Len. Thank you.
Yeah. Easy peasy. Moving on to the next one. Our boy Magones. What's up,
I got a stash for you. Check Diallo.
The other big man in New Orleans.
He played 6 minutes the other night.
Yeah, that's a deep.
Hey, think about it. When we to answer the question that we didn't answer before, as far as like if Anthony Davis got hurt, Check Diallo would play a ton of minutes.
That is true. Fair enough. Magone says, we actually answered this one, but I'll let you say it again. Is Nico top 50 or more top 30? Just say it. Say it to make me happy.
He's more top 30, Dan.
Yeah.
He's definitely more top 30. No, I mean, he's probably closer to top 30 than he is top 50.
Is there anyone you're dropping Torian Prince for at this point? Anybody
Out of the
surf?
names that we've talked about today, can you? What's the biggest name that we've talked about today?
Probably
I'm not dropping for Greg Monroe,
Garrett Allen.
obviously. No.
I think that's probably the biggest upside guy we've talked about, right? That's not like heavily owned. Markieff.
Let's talk about no, not dropping him for Markieff, and let's talk about Devante Murray. It was a guy that was picked up a lot last week. I wouldn't drop him for him.
Yeah, I'm still sitting on the table there and saying as soon as Kawhi ever plays a game, then everybody in San Antonio just sort of.
You know what? Honestly, if Kawhi didn't have the year that he's had, I think I would have like a perfect fantasy season.
Kawhi. That's a rough. Jeremy Lamb. You've talked about Kelly Olynyk already. Are you still holding Lamb in the hopes that one dude gets moved in Charlotte?
Yeah. Must add. If he gets dropped, you just go add him. Like they're trying. The vets are trying. I think Batum right now is seeing the writing on the wall. He's going to be signed on as a bad contract on a rebuilding team for a very long time if they can't do something to make people think this team can do something. So he has hit the gas pedal in advance of the trade deadline. Kemba is Kemba. It'll be hard to move Kemba kind of because there's so many point guard jobs locked down in the league, but he's somebody that they need to trade. And so when you factor those two things alone, they don't have a lot of depth. It could be the Jeremy Lamb show really soon, and you just don't drop him, and you pick him up if he gets dropped.
Next two posts in the chat room were funny. I'm not going to read them on air, but go find the 9:45 a.m. posts. People go enjoy those. The two guys having some fun. Malcolm Brogdon. What do we make of that? Hold, just see how this thing shakes out.
I have him in one team, an important team, and I'm going to hold him until I get at least one update. But yeah, no, I mean, looking at his, say he comes back and he's fine. I mean, he's kind of a top 100 guy. So do you want to miss on a free agent because you held this injured player to see if he gets through this without any sort of serious injury? Not a great place for injury reporting. My hope is that we get a good solid update before the trade deadline really gets busy.
Bogdan versus Torian Prince. Would you still stick with Prince?
Yeah, I think so. The Kings are really good at screwing this up, and Bogdan, his stat set is not as great as you would think it could be. Bogdan is great. I think he could be easily a top 60 guy, but I think it's safer to call him top 75, and that's where Prince is right now, more or less, and he's kind of at the bottom of his production curve. So I would call that Prince over Bogdan.
Kyle Kuzma, sell high, buy low, or this is roughly what you're going to get the rest of the way?
I'm going to say sell whatever you call him right now. I don't know if the Kuzma hype is as big as it's been in the past. They definitely want to develop him. What does this team look like after the trade deadline? They could be very different. But I don't know. Be picky about it. I think he's a top 80 guy, and that's, I don't know that you will be getting much better than that in return.
Yeah. What am I to do with Tyreke Evans? I've been riding this cycle for a long time, and now it seems like the wheels are about to come off.
This is why we told you guys to sell high 5 million times.
Well, we thought he was going to be hurt before this, but now he's definitely getting traded, right?
I mean, the trade was always in play. I mean, he's a low-cost contract at a team that's going nowhere that, is going to help a playoff contender. So, I mean, that's always kind of in the backdrop.
You kind of just have to hold, right? You're not going to get equal value for him at this point. You can try.
I don't think that you trade him to a team that needs him. Look, I mean, he might land say he lands at like the Clippers or something. The team that needs his scoring, then maybe he can keep some of this up. He is as far as rhythm goes, like whatever team that acquires him is going to basically tell him if they don't need his full scoring, they're going to be like, hey, guess what? Things are different now. Like you don't run the show, like your second, third fiddle, that's going to have a major impact on his numbers. So,
Would you rather have Tyreke Evans or Markieff Morris the rest of the way?
Markieff Morris, which I think speaks to the value problem with Tyreke Evans right now more than anything. It's not that Tyreke can't do it. I think he's proven he can shoot now, which is just fascinating, at this stage of his career that he finally figured it out. But yeah, no, I would rather have Markieff Morris.
Greg Monroe stash versus Big Sauce stash.
Oh, Monroe. Easy.
Greg Monroe stash versus Alex Len stash.
Monroe, easy.
All right, we're knocking out a few questions here in a heartbeat here. Is Alex Len terrible, or is this Phoenix? Or is it both?
It's both. I mean, Len, I think the year that they tried to make him move away from the hoop really did a lot to damage his game. He needed to figure out how to play on the interior because he's not fast enough to be a stretch player. His value proposition would be figuring out how to operate offensively in the paint area and to really take advantage of some of his nimbleness in that respect. So I don't think he developed his game down there. Whoever's decision that was probably both of their choices. Big men love to, even back in like 8th grade, like the center on my 8th grade basketball team wanted to shoot threes. Like it's just a classic big man wants to play outside thing. And you got to tell them, no, you go down there and you play. That's where you belong. It's just a classic thing that you do. So Len, though, when he plays closer to the rim, he has better field goal percentage that isn't prohibitive. And then I think there may or may not be a correlation with the blocks, but I think that players that say I play in the paint, they generally gravitate toward having more blocks, and the lack of blocks has been a problem for him. So I think that there's blame to go around, and now you just got to see, does Phoenix want anything to do with this guy? I mean, look, they just liquidated Greg Monroe for nothing. And basically, they could have had an asset to trade. The entire league was interested in the guy. If they had played him for 20 minutes a game for, the entire stretch that he was with them, they could have possibly gotten a small pick out of this or something. And they didn't. And now look at Len. Like, they have no urgency to play him at all. Maybe it's the injuries. Maybe it's not. We don't know.
Greg Monroe versus Jonathan Isaac stash.
It's Greg Monroe. There's a report that just came out today that Isaac is not close. When he gets close, whatever that would be, so let's say that's late February, I mean, you're talking about a month and a half of potential, money counting stat greatness. And I think he's good enough to be good. It's asking a lot for a young player who hasn't played much to come back off of an injury, to come back into the league. And yeah, nobody will be playing hard against him, but it's asking a lot for him to come back in and be good. I think there's value there, but I'd rather see what happens with Greg Monroe.
Which side of a trade do you like here? Monroe and Devante Murray or Markieff Morris?
No, you got to take Markieff Morris. Devante Murray, even if Kawhi doesn't play at all this year, you have to question whether Devante Murray can handle, or whether he can get over the hump with the money counting stat issue. Sometimes he gets like 5 steals. Sometimes he puts a 0 up. No threes, no steals, no blocks. Yeah. And if he's not going huge in that game, then even if he is going huge, it's not that valuable. But if he's not going huge, it's a huge, huge miss.
Kelly Olynyk versus Danny Green.
Kelly Olynyk, I'm your boy Whiteside. I don't have doubts about his basketball ability. Like, he's proven that he can be an inside scorer and a threat. And defensively, I think that he's shown that he's not like, hasn't lost his fastball or anything like that. He's not the same guy that came into the league and got like 3.8 blocks per game for a stretch, but like, he is still good. I think the Heat want out of the Whiteside business. Whether or not they find a taker is another question. If anybody can fit that contract in is another question. But he's shown that he can miss games due to injury. And Kelly Olynyk and Bam Adebayo, I think that the Heat as an organization are very high on that combo because they kind of complement each other. Bam can protect the rim, be more of a defensive presence, and then you get what you want out of Kelly Olynyk. So I think Olynyk there is the guy. And I forget who the other guy was, but who's the other guy?
Who was the other guy? Actually, it was Danny Green was the other one.
Kawhi could come back and knock him out. I know he had a great game, and I think he's a late round guy going forward, but give me Kelly Olynyk, and I think he has like top 60 upside if everything breaks the right way for him.
Stanley Johnson, rest of season. Where do you see him ranking?
I'm going to give him a top 100. This is the highest I've ever been on him. I feel like he's seeing the game a little bit better. I think that now that they've gotten rid of two guys that are in his sort of positional group, I think that he's going to be let loose. I think that he's kind of got a good thing going. As you got Blake, you got Andre there. He can just sort of do his thing, play off of them, and then focus on getting a little bit better in the defensive categories. And I think top 100s is ROS.
It is officially noon here on the left coast, which means also Bru's neck is probably about to give way. It is time for the lightning round. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 9 questions left, so we should be able to knock these out in 1 to 2 minutes. Bru, you've been struck by lightning. How do you feel?
Great, ready? Man. I feel great. Hey, you know what? You play through the injuries here at Hoop Ball. We're all about wins.
Get your ball hooped. Harrison or Satoransky for the next 6 to 8 weeks?
Harrison, because then you can keep them after those 6 to 8 weeks.
Rashawn Holmes, Nerlens Noel, either of those guys getting moved at the trade deadline?
Man, I'm telling you, me and Daryl Morey have been going back and forth on Twitter. He hasn't said anything back to me, but if Daryl Morey doesn't figure this out, it's on him. He has been warned.
God, that does feel like a pretty good fit for the need a backup to Clint Capella.
I was sitting here thinking about this. Like there's so many teams that he fits with because he's a big man that can play the 5 or the 4 and block shots for your 5 that can't block shots. Like I was thinking Denver. Denver's active in the trade deadline, right? You got this Mason Plumlee thing. They're not, Plumlee and Jokic isn't the first thing you think of as a good idea. Why not bring in Holmes as your 4-5, have him be the swing big man behind and play next to Nikola Jokic, who can't protect the rim. It's like he fits everywhere.
We're going to play a Greg Monroe versus game. There may be some names that have already come up, but I've forgotten who we've done this already with.
Talk like an auctioneer, Dan. Talk like an auctioneer.
All right. That's really more like a 1920s criminal. You'll never catch me, copper. Greg Monroe versus Bobby Portis. I broke Bru.
This is really close. I'm going to go Portis, and look, if you're shooting for upside, it's Monroe, but Portis is going to cruise into top 90, and I think that the stability there is something you want.
We've already done Marquise Chris. He won that battle. Monroe versus Josh Jackson. I believe that was a Monroe, correct?
Yeah, but if you can somehow discount those percentages, then I would jump Jackson over Monroe.
Monroe versus Jarrett Allen.
Allen.
Monroe versus Devante Murray.
This might sting if Monroe ends up being a non-rotation guy, but right now it's Monroe.
Monroe versus Slow-Mo.
Monroe.
And that is the Monroe versus game. On to the next one. What would you give up or take for Isaiah Thomas right now in fantasy? Like, what's the type of offers that you should lob out there?
I think right now, if you can lob out top 50, that's probably smart. I mean, there is some risk here that it blows up in Cleveland. It's kind of outside of Isaiah Thomas's control. Like, if LeBron pulls a LeBron, that would be a risk. What if, like I heard John Barry on the ESPN telecast, and he had this like hypothetical trade that was like Iman Shumpert and Isaiah Thomas and Tristan Thompson for like Lou Williams and DeAndre Jordan. Okay, so what happens if Isaiah Thomas gets traded to the Clippers? I think he'd probably be fine in that scenario. I don't think they're really looking to trade Isaiah Thomas right now. But as far as like LeBron, if he is some sort of unrest with the organization, that's the only way I see Isaiah Thomas really losing like top 40, dipping underneath top 40 value. So I would offer a top 50, see if it would work. And I'd even probably offer a top 40 just to see it work. And then from there, if you're looking at a top 30 player, I think you probably want to hang on to the top 30 because you're now hedging against the risk of Isaiah falling off.
Tyreke Evans versus Robert Portis. Who would you rather have rest of season?
Give me Tyreke. Let's see if he can keep it going.
Is Aaron Gordon a sell right now because Orlando might move him?
I don't think they're moving him.
I think he's a buy, actually.
I think, if anything, just because he's sort of been off the radar with the hip concerns. I mean, injuries with him have always been sort of the thing that kept me from getting super aggressive on him. But as far as the rest of the equation goes, he's ready to rock.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names here in the player ranker. You've heard them, all of these names already in today's show. It's just a new collection of them in the old, put the Yahtzee dice in the thing, shake it up, and out they come. Torian Prince is name number 1. Bogdan is name number 2. Markieff Chris is name number 3. Gregory Moose Monroe, name number 4. And Devante Murray is name number 5. How do you rank these bad boys?
Okay, so Murray's going to be on the bottom, followed by, I think, Monroe. We're going to go, I'm going to actually put Prince ahead of Chris, though I think Chris is close. So it's going to go Prince, Chris, Bogdan, Monroe, and Murray.
John Henson, rest of season outlook.
Top 100.
Teodosic or Markieff Chris?
Markieff Chris by a long shot.
Markieff Chris or Andrew Harrison?
Markieff Chris by a long shot.
Boban Marjanovic.
Ah, man, it took us this long to get into Boban.
I saved it.
That's all the ITL guys wanted to talk about other than you.
I come up on that show a lot. Apparently, everybody thinks I hate the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, that's odd. Boban. All right, let's talk some Boban. He's going to have value in 20 minutes per game. We know that. I think that it's questionable as to whether or not he gets that. I think he's a top 100 to top 150 value.
If Rashawn Holmes ends up with the Pelicans, would he play over Check Diallo? Depends if Colangelo goes with him.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, wherever Holmes goes, he plays.
Last question, and then we are done. Sorry, folks, if you type anything from this point forward. Andrew Harrison, Stanley Johnson, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Who do you like in that trio?
Okay, so I'm going to put Bogdan at the top, followed by Stanley Johnson, followed by the other guy.
You're out of the hot seat. The lightning round is over. The questions are done, and the show is complete. Aaron Bruski, the architect. Nicely done, my good man.
Yeah, I'm going to put some finger guns up for the screen to match that thing that you did on the VSiN network where they did a video thing and it had you in your high school picture is what it looks like, and then you in your college picture is what it looks like, and then it's like the aging of Dan Besbris, but the last one is you with the finger guns pointed at the camera.
Oh, man. Where did that picture come from? Login Facebook or something like that. I don't even post pictures on Facebook. Probably stuff my wife's been posting. You can see it's really, you can track my age like a tree. You just look for like the markings of where my hairline
I got the same thing going on, Dan. We should track it by LeBron headbands. How many LeBron headbands do you have this year? I got about 1.5.
I'm at like 3 LeBrons, I think, at this point, and cruising back. Yeah, you're at like 3.5.
I know, dude. That's okay.
Yeah. Here at Hoop Ball, get your ball hooped and your hair receded. So the taglines are in R&D. Wow. Bruce going to work over there. I hope everybody could see that. I know that it only shows who's talking, but I think your face is in the corner, so hopefully they got to see the licking of the fingers and the straightening of the hair. Really magical times here at Hoop Ball. Hey, we got a trade deadline live show.
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't mention that faster.
Yeah, this is an Easter egg for those that stay to the end of the program. Trade deadline live show, February 8th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. All of your favorite Hoop Ball luminaries and the ITL guys to tell me why I'm so mean to the Milwaukee Bucks. They'll be joining us on the upcoming Thursday, at least one of the two. I think I got to get a confirmation from Lord Welsh. Bruski will be there. He'll be monitoring the Twitterverse like a hawk. It's the greatest day in the NBA season for those of us who like the wacky NBA stories. We've already got a taste of it. Blake Griffin's a Piston. Nico's a Pell. The craziness has begun. Follow Aaron Bruski on Twitter, at Aaron Bruski, at Dan Besbris if you want to give me a check. And at Hoop Ball Fantasy is where all of that good stuff is going to be going first as we aggregate the information leading up to the trade deadline, chew it up, and spit it back out to you as something you can digest. Brew, final thoughts before we hit the off button on this little puppy.
I can't wait, man. This is going to be a great week. It's a great week for basketball fans, and I do think it's going to be better than the previous years. So, just get locked into all those things that Dan just said and get ready for that live show. That live show has value. I mean, everybody that owned Rashawn Holmes last year got him because of that live show. So, all those little nuggets are huge, and you just got to be ready for them.
Is instant feedback on everything that happens during the trade deadline. You don't have to wait for a site to type it up. You don't have to wait for thoughts and analyses. Those things take time to write. You can get it right here live at the Hoop Ball YouTube page. We'll be tweeting out links all week long. If you want to set a reminder or subscribe to our YouTube page, I would strongly suggest you do. To those of you listening to this podcast after the fact, make sure you go follow all those Twitter accounts I told you about so you can make sure to get involved in that YouTube live show as well. Over 6,000 people watched that thing last year. We're looking to go higher on year number 2 of the trade deadline Hoop Ball Spectacular. He's Aaron Bruski. I'm Dan Besbris. Aaron will be back with you on Sunday. Premium subscribers get the weekly waiver show. We've got the reverse chronological lightning round coming up on Monday, as per usual. And, of course, Brew and I will talk weekly lineups on Monday afternoon as well. For Aaron, I'm Dan. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Back at you in a couple of days.
Get your ball hooped.